Uh-oh, it's a Thursday video. Hey guys, I wanted to do a follow-up video on the Abrego Garcia story. If you haven't seen my first video, I'll leave a link down in the description, and I highly recommend you watch it. I got a lot of comments, and I think it's important to discuss them for further clarity, but also for those of you who don't have time to study this issue and track down all the wild details, I hope this can help you be better informed when you debate your crazy relative. And it was so amazing to see how many people were willing to defend this blatantly fascist process. I got a lot of comments saying he was MS-13, which hasn't been proven yet. They also said 2 judges confirmed that he was MS-13, but those immigration judges didn't rule on that specifically. But those commenters are right about that. And I have no idea why they would do that, considering that all of this evidence was based on that one gang sheet from that 2019 arrest, which included the bull's clothing, the rolls of money, and the high gang area. Which brings us to a detail I really should have included in my video. All of those convenient details in the 2019 arrest were according to one informant of a discredited cop. We don't know who the informant is and how reliable they are. Normally, in a legal setting, you have to have multiple corroborating informants. That's much better proof. Furthermore, the cop who provided the informant pled guilty to misconduct in a different case. And there were many experts that dispute that having a bull's cap or the tattoos are actually MS-13. The other thing they pointed out was Garcia's 2022 traffic stop, and that the video was proof that he was doing human trafficking. That's the so-called evidence the Trump administration points to. Once again, he wasn't convicted or charged with anything. And that vehicle was owned by his boss, who pled guilty to smuggling undocumented immigrants into the country. So, not a good look, but again, that's not proof of criminality, MS-13 membership, or even smuggling, and it needs to be tried in court. Sure, it may be grounds for deportation, but not imprisonment. And that's the important distinction here, because many of the commenters tried to make this about immigration, and that's a fine conversation to have, but that's not the point of this video. And that's not the reason I'm hella pissed about it. When it's framed in terms of immigration, it makes it seem like a reasonable disagreement. No, this is about due process. This is about the fact that the Trump administration can scoop up anybody they believe to be an immigrant and throw them in a maximum security prison with 0 consequences or checks on that power. Oftentimes they told me I was defending a wife beater, and even if that's true, is sending him to a human rights violation prison outside of the law not cruel and unusual punishment? And again, it's still a red herring from focusing on the issue of due process. So let's prove that allegation in court, because I think there's something there. There was also audio of Garcia's wife admitting to some abuse. However, she made a public statement saying that she overreacted and did it out of caution due to some past trauma, which I left out because it wasn't the point, and I acknowledged that there was probably something there. The real problem is due process. That's why this issue is so important to swing voters, according to some polls. So it's important to talk about that. Oh, and speaking of due process, I saw many comments that made the argument that undocumented immigrants don't deserve due process, only citizens do. But that is simply not true. If you look at the 5th Amendment, it says, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime, blah, 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 blah. So, unless you're saying undocumented immigrants aren't persons, which is a whole different problem in of itself, that's definitely not... That's not our Constitution. And the 6th Amendment says, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. So that doesn't say citizens are afforded the right to a speedy trial. It says the accused, which applies to everybody. Now, we haven't always followed that, but this is historically accurate because John Adams famously defended British soldiers from the Revolutionary War. So it absolutely makes sense in historical context. The Alien Enemies Act does not overrule that, despite what some may say. Many individuals pointed out that the 2019 withholding order was actually for Guatemala. No, it wasn't. The Supreme Court acknowledged that he wasn't supposed to be sent to El Salvador in the 2nd sentence of that 2025 order. And if we go back to the 2019 order, you see that the withholding order for Guatemala was denied, but what was granted was the withholding of removal pursuant to INA. Can someone tell me how to pronounce that or what the heck that is? I've already done way too much research as it is. Anyway, Section 241B3, which confers the right to not be deported to a particular country under the condition that he must show that there is a clear probability of persecution in that country. It also says Garcia has demonstrated that he was subject to past persecution. That's literally what it says. So I assume it's that. So let's reread that. Garcia has demonstrated that he was subject to past persecution. And where did that happen? El Salvador, when Barrio 19 threatened his family's restaurant. So that's it. He literally has been granted that. So while the main country in question was Guatemala for some reason, it still bars him from being sent to El Salvador. Ooh, and this pathetic argument is my favorite. We, as in the US, didn't imprison Garcia. His own government did. That is an absolutely insane thing to say. We paid for the prisons and sent them there with the intent that they would be locked up. That's like ordering a pizza for your friend, paying for it, driving it to their house, and then acting all surprised and blaming Domino's when your friend asks why he has a pizza in his hands. Those were the main comments, but there were so many more, including some pretty nasty comments which were hilariously dealt with. If you're bored, I highly recommend you check them out. Make sure to select newest first because YouTube suppresses many of them for, naughty language. I couldn't get to all the comments, so I appreciate all the commenters who responded in defense of my Garcia piece. I hope you learned something from this, and I'll see you on Saturday for some more headlines.